I'm dying alone in this hospital bed, and the son I raised for 20 years won't answer my calls. The cancer is eating my body, but it's the question that's killing me. Did he leave because he discovered he was adopted? Please subscribe and like my 10 p.m. stories, one story every night. It truly helps these tales touch more hearts. Share where you're listening from in the comments. Seeing our growing family from around the world always brings me joy. Now, let the story unfold. My name is Dona, and I'm 70 years old. In 3 months, maybe less, the cancer will finish what it started. But before I go, there's a wound that needs air, one that's been bleeding silently for years. This is about the choices we make for love, the secrets we keep to protect those we cherish, and the devastating possibility that those very secrets destroyed everything we tried to build. This is about whether blood truly matters more than love. I was 24 when I first saw him. It was 1979, and I'd just been promoted to branch manager of Celestine Fashion on Fifth Avenue, the youngest manager in the company's history. I wore my ambition like armor back then, tailored blazers and confidence that turned heads. My mother used to say I had a fire that wouldn't quit, and she wasn't wrong. I'd worked my way up from sales assistant in just 3 years, determined to prove that a girl from Queens could make it in Manhattan's fashion world. The branch was thriving under my management. Sales were up 30%. My team respected me. I had a corner office with a view of the city that sparkled with possibility. I had everything a young woman could want in that era: independence, success, and respect, except someone to share it with. My friends were getting married and starting families, and I'd smile at their wedding photos while my own apartment stayed empty except for fashion magazines and takeout containers. That's when I met Jack. His shop was 3 blocks from my office, a small place called Henderson's Tobacco and News, tucked between a deli and a dry cleaner. I'd passed it 100 times without noticing, but one rainy Tuesday, I ducked inside to escape a downpour, and there he was, behind the counter, sandy brown hair, kind hazel eyes, and a smile that made me forget I was soaked to the bone. He offered me a towel without being asked, and when our fingers touched during the exchange, something shifted in my chest. What I didn't know then was that this gentle shopkeeper would become my entire world, and that loving him would lead me to the loneliest death imaginable. Jack Henderson was nothing like the men I'd dated before. He wasn't ambitious or flashy. He didn't drive a sports car or talk about climbing corporate ladders. He was 34 when we met, content with his small shop, his routine, and his simple life. He read poetry, actual poetry, Frost and Whitman, and could tell you the story behind every tobacco blend on his shelves. His hands were steady and careful, whether he was wrapping a purchase or brushing hair from my face. We fell into a rhythm over those 3 years. I'd stop by his shop during lunch breaks, and he'd have my coffee ready, cream, no sugar, exactly how I liked it. On weekends, we'd walk through Central Park, his arm around my waist, talking about everything and nothing. He listened when I ranted about difficult clients. I listened when he worried about rent increases. We fit together like puzzle pieces, different shapes that somehow made a complete picture. My friends didn't understand it. "He's a shopkeeper, Donna," my roommate Sandra would say, wrinkling her nose. "You're management. You could have anyone." But they didn't see what I saw. They didn't see how he looked at me like I was the only woman in New York. They didn't see how he remembered every small thing I mentioned: my favorite flower, peonies, my mother's birthday, and the song that made me cry. By year 3, I knew. I wanted to marry this man. I wanted to wake up next to him for the rest of my life. I wanted children with his kind eyes and gentle soul. On a cold November evening in 1982, I proposed to him over dinner in our favorite Italian restaurant. I'd bought a simple gold band and rehearsed my speech for weeks. His face went pale, and I watched the dream crumble before he even opened his mouth. "I can't marry you, Dona." His voice cracked on my name, and his hazel eyes filled with tears I'd never seen before. The restaurant noise, clinking glasses, laughter from nearby tables, faded into a roar in my ears. My hand, still holding the small velvet box, began to shake. "What do you mean you can't?" My voice sounded strange and distant. "Jack, I love you. You love me. I know you do." "I do." He reached across the table, gripping my free hand so tightly it hurt. "God, Donna, I love you more than I thought possible, but I can't give you what you deserve. I can't give you children." The word hung between us like smoke. Children. I'd imagined them too. Maybe 3, with Jack's thoughtful eyes and my determination. Little ones running through our apartment, filling the spaces with noise and chaos and life. I'd already named them in secret dreams. Jerry for a boy, Emma for a girl. "We can try," I whispered, my throat tight. "Medical technology is advancing." "No." He pulled his hand back, and the loss of his warmth felt like winter. "I'm infertile, Donna. Sterile. It's not something that can be fixed. I had mumps as a teenager, severe complications. The doctors were very clear." His fingers trembled as he wiped his eyes. "I've known since I was 17. I've carried this for half my life, and I've never told anyone because I knew it would end every relationship I had." I sat there, the ring box still open, the gold band catching the candlelight. Around us, couples laughed and clinked wine glasses, celebrating anniversaries and proposals and futures that seemed suddenly foreign. My mind raced through possibilities, adjustments, and compromises, but underneath it all was one clear, terrifying truth. I couldn't imagine my life without him. The waiter approached our table, took one look at our faces, and quietly retreated. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I lay in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, running through every scenario. I was 27 years old. I could walk away, find someone else, and have biological children. It was the logical choice, the expected choice. My mother would tell me to leave. She'd never fully approved of Jack anyway, and thought I was settling beneath my station. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. The way he smiled when I walked into his shop, the way he read poetry aloud in bed, his voice soft and sure. The way he held me during thunderstorms was because he knew they frightened me. The way he made me feel seen, truly seen for the first time in my life. December came with bitter cold and the kind of clarity that only crisis brings. I called him on a Friday evening, my decision made. "Meet me at the park, our bench." He was already there when I arrived, bundled in his wool coat, breath-forming clouds in the freezing air. He looked like he hadn't slept either, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders hunched against more than just the cold. When he saw me, he stood, and I could see the resignation on his face. He thought I was coming to say goodbye. "I'll marry you," I said, my words cutting through the winter air. "I'll marry you and we'll adopt. We'll build a family the way thousands of couples do. We'll love a child who needs love, and we'll be happy." He stared at me, snowflakes catching in his hair. "Donna, you can't." "I can. I am. I spent 3 weeks trying to imagine my life without you, Jack. I tried to convince myself to walk away. I couldn't do it. I don't want someone else's biological children. I want a life with you. That's all I want. That's everything I want." His face crumpled, and he pulled me into his arms right there on that frozen bench, and we both cried like the future we'd feared losing had just been handed back to us. We were married 6 weeks later, a small ceremony at City Hall with Sandra and Jack's brother as witnesses, and I became Mrs. Henderson with more joy than I'd ever thought possible. Chapter 5. Jerry. The adoption process was longer and more invasive than I'd imagined. Social workers visited our apartment, asked questions that felt like interrogations, and scrutinized our finances and our marriage and our motives. I smiled through it all, my hand in Jack's, both of us performing the role of perfect prospective parents. In private, I worried. What if they said no? What if we weren't good enough? But in the spring of 1984, when I was 28 and Jack was 38, we got the call. A baby boy, 3 months old, brown eyes, wisps of dark hair, and a cry that the social worker apologetically warned us could wake the dead. We didn't care. We drove to the agency with our hearts in our throats, and when they placed him in my arms, this tiny, perfect stranger, I understood what people meant when they said love at first sight. We named him Jerry, after Jack's late father, Jerry Henderson, our son. We made a decision that night, lying in bed with Jerry sleeping in the bassinet beside us. We would never tell him he was adopted. The social worker had encouraged openness, modern thinking, and honesty. But Jack and I looked at each other in the dark and made a different choice. We would protect him from the questions, the feeling of being different, and the potential rejection from cruel children. We would give him normalcy, stability, and the simple gift of belonging without asterisks. "He's ours," Jack whispered, his finger tracing Jerry's tiny hand. "Completely ours. That's all anyone needs to know." I nodded, though something small and uncertain twisted in my chest, a feeling I pushed down and ignored because it didn't fit the happiness of the moment. We moved to a bigger apartment in Queens, close to my mother's house. Jack's shop was doing well enough to support us, and I'd taken a brief leave from Celestine to focus on Jerry. Those first months were a blur of nappies and sleepless nights and the overwhelming terror of being responsible for another human life. But they were also filled with moments so beautiful they hurt. Jerry's first smile, directed at Jack, his laugh when I made silly faces, the way he'd fall asleep on Jack's chest, tiny fist clutching his father's shirt. By Jerry's first birthday, I'd returned to work part-time, and we'd settled into our roles. Jack, the patient, gentle father who could calm any tantrum, and me, the organized, ambitious mother who made sure Jerry had every opportunity. We were happy. We were a family. What we didn't know is that happiness has an expiration date, and ours was just 16 years away.
Jerry was extraordinary. I know every mother thinks that about her child, but with Jerry, it was an observable fact. He walked at 10 months. He spoke in full sentences by 18 months. His preschool teachers called him remarkably bright and emotionally intuitive. By age 5, he was reading chapter books and asking questions about the universe that left Jack and me scrambling for answers. But it wasn't just his intelligence, it was his heart. Jerry was the kind of child who noticed when someone was sad and tried to fix it. He'd draw pictures for Jack when my husband looked tired. He'd save his allowance to buy me flowers, just because. When Sandra's husband left her, 8-year-old Jerry made her a card that said, "You're still wonderful," in crayon, and she cried for an hour. Jack and I would lie in bed at night, listening to Jerry's soft snores through the baby monitor. We kept long past necessity, and marvel at our luck. "We made the right choice," Jack would whisper. "Look at him, Donna. Look at who he is." And I'd agree, pushing away the tiny voice that sometimes whispered, "But he's not really yours. What happens when he finds out?" I never told Jack about that voice. I was ashamed of it. Jerry was ours in every way that mattered. We'd been there for every fever, every skinned knee, every school play and parent-teacher conference. We'd taught him to ride a bike, to tie his shoes, to be kind. Biology was just cells and DNA. Love was what we gave him every single day. The years passed in the beautiful chaos of raising a child. Jerry's elementary school years, his awkward middle school phase, his transformation into a teenager who somehow kept his kindness intact even as his voice deepened and his shoulders broadened. He looked nothing like Jack. Jerry's dark hair and brown eyes came from biological parents we'd never met. But he moved like his father, with that same gentle, thoughtful way of occupying space. By the time Jerry reached 10th grade, Jack and I had been married for 13 years. We'd survived financial stress, my mother's death, and the normal wear of marriage. We'd survived, and more than that, we'd thrived. Our family worked. And then, on a June evening that should have been perfect, everything fell apart in the space of 20 minutes. Stay with me. This story is just getting darker. Subscribe now and don't miss the rest of tonight's tale at 10 p.m. Jerry's 10th grade graduation was held in the school auditorium on a warm Thursday evening. I sat between Jack and Sandra, watching our son, our brilliant, kind, perfect son, accept his certificate with honors. He'd been accepted into the advanced placement program for his junior year. His teachers predicted great things. Jack squeezed my hand as Jerry crossed the stage, and I saw tears on my husband's cheeks. "That's our boy," he whispered, and the pride in his voice made my throat tight. Afterwards, we took Jerry to his favorite restaurant, a little Greek place in Astoria. Jerry talked about his plans for the summer, his excitement about AP chemistry, and his hope to get into Columbia someday. Jack ordered his usual moussaka and too much wine and lit a cigarette despite my nagging. He'd been smoking more lately, stress from the shop, but tonight was a celebration, and I let it go. The drive home was happy, full of teasing and laughter. Jerry in the back seat, Jack driving and me in the passenger seat, pointing out street decorations and making plans for a beach trip. Normal, perfect, the kind of moment you don't know is precious until it's gone. We were 2 blocks from home when Jack's hand slipped from the steering wheel. "Jack?" I turned to look at him, and my blood went cold. His face had gone gray, that terrible waxy gray that means something is catastrophically wrong. His right hand clutched at his chest, fingers clawing at his shirt, and his breath came in shallow, desperate gasps.
"Dad?" Jerry's voice from the back seat, sharp with fear. "Dad, what's wrong?" Jack's mouth moved, trying to form words, but only a wheeze came out. The car began to drift. I grabbed the wheel, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady, and somehow steered us to the curb. The tires hit the sidewalk with a jolt that threw us forward against our seatbelts. "Call 911!" I was screaming now, hands on Jack's face, trying to make him look at me. His skin was cold and clammy under my palms. "Jerry, call 911 right now!" Behind me, I heard Jerry fumbling with the phone, his voice high and panicked as he gave our location to the operator. I unbuckled Jack's seatbelt and lowered him as carefully as I could, his head in my lap. His eyes found mine, and in them I saw fear and love and goodbye all at once. "Stay with me," I begged, stroking his hair like he was the child and I was the parent. "Jack, please, stay with me. The ambulance is coming. Just hold on. Please hold on." His lips moved. I leaned closer, my ear to his mouth, and heard 3 words that would haunt me. "Love you both." Then his eyes rolled back, and his body went slack, and somewhere in the distance I could hear sirens, but they felt like they were coming from another world, one where help arrived in time and husbands didn't die in their wives' arms on graduation night. Jack was pronounced dead at 11:47 p.m. at Queen's Hospital. Cardiac arrest, massive and unsurvivable. The doctor said it so clinically. The damage was extensive. He wouldn't have felt much pain, as if that made it better. As if there was a good way to die at 48 years old in your wife's lap while your son watched from the back seat. They asked if I wanted to see him one more time. I said yes. They led me to a small room where Jack lay on a gurney, covered with a white sheet pulled up to his chest. His face looked peaceful, younger somehow without the worry lines that had deepened over the past year. I touched his hand, already cooling, and felt something inside me break in a way I knew would never fully heal. Jerry stood in the doorway, unwilling or unable to come closer. He was 15 years old, and in one night he'd gone from child to orphan. No, not orphan. He still had me. But the father who'd taught him to fish, who'd helped with homework, who'd sat up with him during nightmares, that father was gone. The funeral was 3 days later. Jack's brother came from Boston. Sandra held my hand through the service. Jerry sat between us, dry-eyed and silent, and I worried about that silence more than I would have worried about tears. The rabbis spoke about Jack's kindness, his gentle spirit, and his love for his family. I barely heard it. I kept thinking about the cigarettes, the ones I'd nagged him about for years, the ones the doctor said had weakened his heart and created the conditions for catastrophe. If I'd nagged harder, if I'd thrown them away, if I'd made him see a cardiologist, if.
After we buried Jack in a cemetery in Queens under an oak tree, Jerry and I went home to our apartment that suddenly felt cavernous and empty. We moved around each other like ghosts for days, then weeks. I took leave from work. Jerry stopped talking about summer plans. We existed rather than lived. Two people sharing space and grief, and an unspoken question: how do we go on from here? I tried to be strong for Jerry. I cooked meals he didn't eat. I suggested activities he declined. I told him it was okay to cry, to be angry, and to feel however he felt. He nodded and said nothing and disappeared into his room, where I could hear him on his phone at all hours, talking to friends, to anyone who wasn't me. A month after Jack died, the bills started coming, and I realized grief was a luxury we couldn't afford for long.
Jack's tobacco shop, Henderson's, had been his pride. 20 years he'd run it, building relationships with customers who came not just for cigarettes and newspapers, but for conversation, for the rare tobacco blends Jack imported, and for the sense of community he'd created. When he died, I thought briefly about selling it, but Jerry surprised me. "I want to try," he said one morning in July, the first full sentence he'd volunteered in weeks. "Dad loved that shop. I want to keep it going." He was 15. He knew nothing about running a business, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Purpose, maybe, or grief finding direction, and I couldn't say no. So we made a plan. Jerry would work the shop during the summer, and I'd hire someone to help manage it during school. I'd oversee finances from my job at Celestine. We'd make it work. For a few months, it almost did. Jerry threw himself into learning the inventory, memorizing the regular customers, and trying to recreate his father's warm efficiency. I'd stop by after work and find him behind the counter, exactly where Jack used to stand, and the resemblance was so painful I sometimes had to leave. But Jerry's heart wasn't it. How could it be? He was a teenager who should have been thinking about college applications and first dates, not profit margins and supplier negotiations. By Christmas, the cracks were showing. Inventory was mismanaged, regular customers started going elsewhere, bills piled up on the desk in the back office. "Maybe we should sell," I suggested gently one evening in January, a year after Jerry had taken over. "I'm trying, Mom." His voice cracked on the word Mom, and I saw the guilt on his face. "I'm really trying." "I know you are, sweetheart, but trying to save Dad's shop won't bring him back." He looked at me then with an expression I'd never seen before, something hard and distant and almost angry. "You think I don't know that?" We closed Henderson's Tobacco and News in March of 2001, 2 years after Jack's death. The landlord kept our security deposit for unpaid rent, we sold the inventory for pennies on the dollar, and when I locked the door for the last time and handed over the keys, I felt like I was burying Jack all over again. Jerry watched from across the street, hands in his pockets, and then turned and walked away without waiting for me. That's when I started to lose him too. The debt from the shop's failure was crushing. Between funeral expenses, unpaid rent, and my reduced work hours, we'd burned through our savings. I picked up extra shifts at Celestine, sometimes working 60-hour weeks, coming home exhausted to find Jerry's dinner uneaten and his bedroom door closed. He was 16 now, a junior in high school, and I barely recognized him. The bright, engaged boy who loved learning had been replaced by someone sullen and distant. His grades dropped, he stopped mentioning college. When I asked about his day, he'd shrug and say, "Fine," and disappear into his room. I tried everything: heart-to-heart conversations that went nowhere, family counseling he refused to attend, restrictions on his phone that he ignored. Sandra said it was normal teenage rebellion, grief manifesting as withdrawal. "Give him time," she advised. "He'll come back to you." But time seemed to make it worse. By his senior year, Jerry was barely home. He'd leave for school and return past midnight, reeking of cigarette smoke and sometimes alcohol. When I confronted him, he'd explode. "You're not Dad." he shouted once, slamming his fist on the kitchen table hard enough to make the dishes jump. "Stop trying to control me like you're him." "I'm your mother," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm allowed to care where you are at 2 in the morning." "My mother," he laughed, bitter and sharp. "Right."
Something about the way he said it sent ice through my veins. But before I could question it, he was gone, door slamming behind him, leaving me standing alone in the kitchen, wondering when I'd lost my son and how to get him back. His 18th birthday came and went with barely an acknowledgement. He graduated high school by the skin of his teeth, with no honors, no celebration, and no plans for the future. I tried to be patient. I tried to be understanding. I tried to remember that he was grieving, that he'd lost his father at a crucial age, and that this was trauma expressing itself. But patience and understanding weren't enough. It happened on a Tuesday in September, 3 months after Jerry's graduation. He was supposed to be looking for jobs, maybe considering community college. Instead, he was sleeping until noon and going out until dawn, burning through what little money he had left from selling Jack's shop equipment. I came home early from work that day, exhausted and worried and at the end of my rope. I found Jerry in the living room with his feet on the coffee table, scrolling through his phone, the apartment a mess around him, dishes in the sink, laundry everywhere, the detritus of someone who'd stopped caring. "Jerry, we need to talk." He didn't look up. "Not now, Mom." "Yes, now." I stood between him and the TV, forcing him to acknowledge me. "This has to stop. You're 19 years old. You're not working, you're not in school, and you're barely living here. What are you doing with your life?" He set his phone down slowly, and when he looked at me, his eyes were cold. "What do you care?" "What do I care?" I stared at him, shocked. "I'm your mother. Of course I care. I've always cared. Everything I've done has been for you." "Everything you've done." He stood up, and I realized with a start that he was taller than me now, broader, a man where there'd been a boy. Like working all the time and never being here, like trying to replace Dad with rules and lectures, like pretending we're this perfect little family when we both know the truth. My heart started pounding. What truth? That I'm not really yours. The words came out flat, factual, and devastating. That you adopted me and never told me, that everything about my childhood was a lie. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. "Jerry, who told you? Does it matter?" His laugh was harsh. "I've known for 2 years, found the paperwork in Dad's desk when we were closing the shop. Adoption records, court documents, the whole truth you and Dad decided I didn't deserve to know." I reached for him, but he stepped back. "Sweetheart, we didn't tell you because we wanted to protect you. We loved you so much. You thought you'd lie to me for my entire life." His voice broke. "You thought you'd let me believe I was yours when I was just some kid you took in because Dad couldn't have real children. You are real." I was crying now, tears streaming down my face. "You are my real son. Biology doesn't matter. Love is what makes a family." "Then why didn't you trust me with the truth?" He grabbed his jacket from the couch. "I'm done, Mom. I'm done with this house and these lies and pretending everything's okay when Dad's dead and you're not even my real mother." "Jerry, please." But he was already at the door, and when he opened it, I saw a packed bag waiting in the hallway. He'd planned this. This wasn't impulse. This was premeditated abandonment. "Don't," I begged. "Please don't leave like this. Let's talk. Let's figure this out together." He looked at me one last time, and I saw tears in his eyes too, but they didn't stop him. "Goodbye, Dona." Not Mom. Dona. The door closed, and I heard his footsteps receding down the hallway, down the stairs, and out of my life, and I collapsed on the floor of my empty apartment and screamed until my throat was raw, because my son, my baby, my Jerry, my reason for everything was gone, and I didn't know if he was ever coming back. I called him every day for the first month, Voicemail after voicemail, messages that shifted from desperate to angry to pleading. Jerry, please call me back. Jerry, I'm worried about you. Jerry, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please just let me know you're okay. He never answered, never called back, never texted. I hired a private investigator after 6 months, found out Jerry was couch surfing with friends, working odd jobs, alive but deliberately avoiding me. The investigator suggested I let him be and give him space. But how do you give space to someone who's already gone? I showed up at one of his friends' apartments once, desperate to see him. Jerry answered the door, looked at me with exhausted eyes, and said, "You need to stop, Dona. I'm not coming back." Then he closed the door in my face, and I stood in that hallway for 20 minutes before I could make my legs work again. The years blurred together. I kept working at Celestine, got promoted to regional manager, and threw myself into my career because work didn't abandon you or call you a liar or refuse to acknowledge that love is more than DNA. I moved to a smaller apartment. The old one had too many ghosts. I attended Sandra's wedding, smiled for photos, and pretended I was fine. But I wasn't fine. I was a mother without a child, carrying photos of a son who'd erased me from his life. Sometimes I'd see young men on the street who looked like Jerry, and my heart would stop. Sometimes I'd write him letters I never sent, pages and pages explaining and apologizing and begging him to understand that we'd only kept the secret because we'd thought it was right. After all, we'd wanted him to feel ours completely because we loved him so much. On what would have been Jerry's 25th birthday, I got a call from an unknown number. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. Jerry? But it wasn't Jerry. It was a hospital. Not for Jerry, for me. The breast cancer diagnosis came on a rainy Tuesday, exactly the way Jack's death had come on a warm Thursday. Sudden, brutal, and life-altering. Stage 3, aggressive. The oncologist used words like treatment plan, prognosis, and quality of life, but all I heard was, "You're dying and your son will never know." I tried to call him, left one more voicemail. "Jerry, it's Mom. I'm sick. I have cancer. I don't know how much time I have, but I need you to know that I love you. I've always loved you. Please, if you can, forgive me. Call me back." He didn't call. The treatment was brutal. Chemotherapy that left me retching and weak, radiation that burnt my skin, hair falling out in clumps. I kept working as long as I could, but eventually I had to take disability leave. Sandra visited when she could, bringing soup and magazines and sympathy I could barely absorb. 5 years. That's how long I've been fighting this cancer, in and out of hospitals, watching my body betray me piece by piece. The doctors say I have weeks now, maybe a month if I'm lucky. I don't feel lucky. I feel like I'm 68 years old, but might as well be 1,000, lying in this bed where I spend most of my days, staring at the ceiling and wondering where my son is and whether he thinks of me at all. Last week, I hired another investigator, found out Jerry got married 3 years ago, has a baby daughter, started his own business doing graphic design. He's 35 now, living a life I'm not part of, creating a family that doesn't include the woman who raised him.
I look at the photo the investigator provided, Jerry holding his daughter, smiling at his wife, and I see Jack in his face. Not biological Jack, but the Jack who raised him, whose mannerisms Jerry absorbed, whose kindness I pray Jerry inherited despite everything. And I wonder, does Jerry tell his daughter about her grandfather, or has he erased us completely, rewritten his history to exclude the parents who loved him, but made the unforgivable mistake of keeping one secret? The bleeding wound isn't the cancer eating my body. It's the question that's haunted me for 16 years. Did I lose him because we adopted him, or because we lied about it?
Would he have stayed if we'd been honest from the beginning? Or would he have left anyway, searching for biological parents who could give him the sense of belonging we never could? I'll die without knowing the answer. I'll die alone in this hospital bed while my son lives his life 15 miles away with a family I'll never meet. And the cruelest irony is that I understand his anger. I understand his feeling of betrayal. I just wish understanding was enough to bring him back. Was adopting him the right choice? I ask the world, because Jerry's not here to ask. I gave him my youth, my love, every good thing I had to give, and it wasn't enough. Biology won, blood won, the secret won. Or love was never enough to begin with, and I was fooling myself all along. They say the truth sets you free, but sometimes it's the truth that destroys everything. I loved a boy who wasn't mine by blood, but was mine in every other way. I kept a secret to protect him, and I'll die wondering if that secret or that love was the real mistake.
If this story touched you, then please subscribe and like My 10 p.m. Stories, one story every night. It truly helps these tales touch more hearts. Share where you're listening from in the comments. Seeing our growing family from around the world always brings me joy. Now, let the story unfold.